Hello, I'm John Rossi, a touring drummer with a love of all things animal. When I'm on the road, I visit as many zoos, aquariums... Hey, wait a minute. What's going on? Hey, what's going on there? Hello? Hello? We interrupt your regularly scheduled program to bring you Rossifari Zoo news. News you can use from the world of zoos and conservation. Every week, we bring you breaking news and analysis from around the globe, featuring the animals you love and the people who care for them. And here's your anchorman, John Rossi.
Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to Rossifari Zoo News, your look at everything going on in the world of zoos, aquariums, conservation, and general animal weirdness. This is a crowdsourced zoo news program, so if you happen to see anything that you think is zoo news worthy, you can go ahead and tag me in it at Rossifari on the socials, at RossifariPod on the TikTok machine, or email rossifaripod@gmail.com. And I'll say your name at the end of the episode, which is pretty thrilling from my understanding. I don't know why I never say my name at the end of the episode, since I give myself a lot of the stories myself. Like, I find lots of these stories. I should say my name lots of times, but, well, I don't. So, yeah, there's that. So with that goofiness said, I wanted to tell you guys, things are going well in John World. I am, as you know, at Mount Gretna. By the time this episode's dropping, we will have officially opened $1 Million Quartet at Gretna Theater. It's running for 2 weeks. It's going to be a good time. I'm pretty excited. I already have some people coming to see the show, and I'm quite excited about it. And yeah, it's going well. It's fun. But I will tell you, this week has been tech. And Gretna does a very fast tech process, which I appreciate. If you don't know, tech is, I can't remember if I said this last week. Whatever. Tech is the period of time where we've rehearsed the show, we know our lines, we know our music, all that stuff, and then we actually get on stage for the first time, and they add the technical elements, so lighting and sound and all of that stuff. And that process is time-consuming and repetitive and, you know, can literally be like, well, we need to play this song 6 times so that we can make sure that we can see everyone and stuff like that. Or, oh, hey, we blocked it so that, you know, this character is going to walk this way on in the room. But there's a wall there that we didn't remember was going to be there. So let's not do that. And so it's an interesting process. And fortunately, Gretna Tech is quick. And the tech process for $1 Million Quartet in general is pretty painless. But it does lead to a lot of really, really long days. Like, we might work, especially as I'm the music director, I might work a 12-hour day a couple days in a row and then go and, you know, perform some shows. And yes, I fully realize that most of you work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and some of you work 12-hour days regularly. But I'm a pampered musician, and my average workday is like 2 to 3 hours a day, sometimes. So for me, it's a lot. And I'm telling you that mainly to tell you that I am recording this as I can, writing and recording around the tech stuff, and I'm exhausted every night. So if this episode is a little shorter than usual, or if I didn't get to all of the stories that you sent, they'll be there next week maybe, but yeah, I'm a sleepy boy. Legit, y'all should be glad that I'm editing out the yawns, because if I didn't, you'd all be having contagious yawns and being yelled at by your boss as you secretly listen to this while working, or nodding off in your car or whatever. So you're welcome. Yeah, but and for those of you that like work 12-hour days all the time and stuff like that, good on you, because I'm tired. And that's really all I have to say about this week. So yeah, let's get to it, shall we?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Ow, that's a funky monkey, tree kangaroo, or a binturong.
It's Zoo News.
Yeah.
All right, so this week our headline story is about a sea turtle named Jorge. The story is super interesting and could potentially have some ramifications for the zoological field. We'll talk a little bit about that. So the basic idea is that a sea turtle has been released into the ocean after living in human care for over 40 years. And the evidence seems to point to him not only surviving, but possibly thriving. And obviously, this is pertinent to zoo and aquarium animals in particular, because one major argument against, releasing all the animals and closing down all the facilities like some people want is that, along with the wild not really being wild, is that the animals won't have the skills needed to succeed. And while some animal rights groups are already pointing to Jorge as an argument against that fact, this story isn't that simple, not by a long shot. So, all right, let's start off with the actual story. Jorge was around 20 years old when he was tangled up in a fishing net and was taken to an aquarium in Argentina. The aquarium was not the ideal home for a sea turtle. He was fed beef and hard-boiled eggs, and the aquarium he was in was only 1.5 feet deep. The mayor of the city he lived in was in charge of his care, and so that means that whenever there was a new mayor, there was also a new caretaker. So, yeah, not exactly an ideal situation for a loggerhead sea turtle to thrive in. But he was popular in the town, and as word spread, people started complaining and more people started to try to save Jorge. And in 2021, activists filed a lawsuit demanding his release, which led to the government deciding to take on the task of preparing Jorge for a return to the ocean. The government partnered with researchers from the Mar del Plata Aquarium, the Argentine Museum of Natural Sciences, and the Institute of Marine and Coastal Research at the National University of Mar del Plata to help Jorge recover his natural instincts, which is necessary for him to be able to thrive in the ocean. So there were many steps involved in this process. They started off with him still in his 1.5 foot deep pool, which was saltwater, but not a precise salinity. And so they increased that salinity until it matched oceanic conditions. And the whole time they were testing his body and making sure he was able to handle the increased salt and to excrete the proper amount of salt, which sea turtles do, and which they weren't sure he'd be able to, but he was, which is cool. They did all kinds of x-rays and other medical tests to ensure that he was handling these early transitions to higher salinity and other changes, effectively and still surviving. He was then moved to a 10-foot deep pool that was at the temperature and exact salinity he would encounter in the ocean, and his diet was slowly changed from beef and hard-boiled eggs to live food that he had to hunt. Now, apparently, this diet change was very challenging, and it took Jorge a long time to learn how to hunt. And when he did, he wasn't very good at it at first. But eventually, over the span of a couple of years, Jorge actually became a good hunter. And after he got the basics down and was still learning to be great, Jorge started being introduced to other animals that he would encounter in the ocean that aren't prey items for sea turtles, such as rays and other fish and sharks and stuff. And honestly, at first, when these new animals would be introduced, they would scare him and he would react poorly. But over time, he did learn to accept these different animals. Currents were eventually added to the pool to teach Jorge how to adapt to them while swimming. And interestingly, as these steps were all taken, other natural behaviors started showing up again, including building shelters down at the bottom of the pool, which is something that loggerhead turtles will do in the wild when they are, at the bottom of the ocean. And Jorge had never done that in his entire time in human care until these other conditions were met. So all of this happened, and eventually Jorge was deemed ready for release, and he was taken to the ocean. And his trackers show that he is succeeding, and he actually seems to be following the path that he would be instinctively following at this time if he had never been removed from the ocean in the first place. So that's cool. The tracker only shows location information, so the scientists that are tracking don't know how well he's doing, but the fact that he is moving and is moving, in the way that his instincts teach him to and would have wanted him to back before he was caught up in nets 41 years ago, that bodes well for him. And that's awesome news. And I genuinely hope that Jorge has an amazing life and a long life. And I don't know if we'll know that because the trackers are only expected to last for a couple of months. But maybe there will be a way to hopefully figure out that we're seeing Jorge from time to time, and that would be cool. But as I mentioned, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is something that could work with all animals or even a lot of them. For starters, sea turtles are some of the most simple or basic large animals out there. And I say that as someone who, I love sea turtles. But there's not a lot going on there. A whole lot of what sea turtles do is purely instinctual without any thought to it. And so there's a difference between following instincts that you're born with and learned behaviors that you would learn out in the wild when you've not been in the wild. Sea turtles are solitary animals. And that's important because there's no community stuff. There's no, how do you live together if you're wolves or whatever, and you get released into the wild, right? So there's some of that as well. But then on top of that, there's also the fact that this turtle did live in the wild for around 20 years doing, wild turtle things before being stuck in this wildly inappropriate aquarium. So it had that skill set buried deep inside it. And even though it didn't use that skill set for 41 years, it had it, And so the animals that are born in human care obviously might not have that, they don't have 20 years of experience. So there's that. And then also on top of that, there's another point that I think is worth mentioning here, which is that the process to get Jorge ready for the wild, it took 3 years. 3 years for one animal that needed a lot of time and a lot of attention. It wasn't just like Jorge was on his own for those 3 years. It was a huge commitment to get this one animal ready. You can't do that with a bunch of animals at once, right? That is such a crazy commitment of time and effort. And then one other thing that I keep thinking about is actually one of our favorite words on this podcast, which is welfare. What was Jorge's, before I say that, let me say this. Jorge did not get proper welfare. 1.5 deep tank, not acceptable. Eating beef and hard-boiled eggs, super not acceptable, right? So terrible welfare right from the start, obviously. But during the 3 years that he was trained for this wildlife experiment, he had to learn how to hunt. He had to learn how to swim. He had different chemicals going into his body than he was used to. He was afraid. They literally said that he was afraid as he was introduced to other animals. And I don't know if that was a very occasional thing or if that happened a lot, but sometimes you do have to do things when an animal's in human care that will, be a bad experience for them, right? Even if it's just medical stuff, right? I understand that. But is it worth 3 years of being afraid and being confused and going through this crazy weird change after crazy weird change, just to then end up in an ocean, which will also have crazy weird changes and all kinds of weird stuff? I don't know. I think it's interesting and it's definitely something worth keeping an eye on. But trying to picture one of the red pandas that I know that was born in human care and can barely figure out how to eat bamboo that's a day older than it wants, or the wrong strand or whatever. And that'll pick around the bananas in the fruit bowl to get to the grapes and only wants the grapes. Picturing that animal going through that same kind of reintroduction process just doesn't seem like it's something that would work. So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting topic, and I'm excited for Jorge, and I hope for the best, but I don't quite think this is the smoking gun that, oh, hey, look, animals can, go from human care to the wild that some people are trying to make it out to be. So yeah. And that brings us to our births for the week. And we're going to start off with one that I'm really excited about. The Fort Worth Zoo has yet again had a successful hatching of gharial babies. Now, if you remember back to the Vicky Pool episode earlier this season, we talked about the fact that there are not many facilities, namely 2, in the U.S. that have successfully had births of gharials, and of them, only one has done it multiple times in a year. That is the Fort Worth Zoo. And it was very exciting that they'd done it 2 years in a row, and now they've done it for a 3rd year in a row. There are 2 babies right now, meaning they've had 8 total over that time. And this is insanely important for this species. There are fewer than 1,000 gharials left in the wild. Fewer than 1,000 is not great. And the fact that the Fort Worth Zoo is the only facility that's had success breeding this species means a lot of things. First of all, what they're learning can then be applied to other facilities, which can also breed these animals successfully. But also, on top of that, it means that there will be more gharials out there in human care that can be, sent to other zoos, because honestly, it's not a species that you see in a ton of facilities either. And the more of them that are out there, the more people will learn about them and be impressed by their insanely huge size. And the more people see them and learn about them, they'll love them and they'll care more about saving them. So huge props to Vicky and the entire team at the Fort Worth Zoo. This is very, very cool. The Exmoor Zoo has announced the birth of a baby honey badger. The little one is a female, and mother is doing a great job taking care of the baby. So this little honey badgelet is absolutely adorable, and very importantly, has already learned to stick its tongue out, which is a very, I don't know if it's a very important skill for honey badgers, but it is sure a very cute one. 2 black and white colobus monkey births have taken place at the Adelaide Zoo. Moms Adele and Zamba have both welcomed little ones that have a lot of energy and love playing together and with the rest of the troop when not cuddling with their moms. Moms are currently carrying them around, so they are visible if you happen to go there. And then the Hogle Zoo put out an interesting announcement this week that has been very worth following. A Bornean orangutan there named Kawan gave birth to a female baby. And Kawan made an effort to be a good mother. She has been on a process with all of that, but unfortunately was not able to successfully take care of the baby. So the zoo collaborated with the SSP for Bornean orangutans, and the decision was made between the two that the zoo needed to hand rear the infant. Now, caregivers are using specialized vests that mimic orangutan fur so that she can hang onto the vest and learn how to cling on a mother figure. Unfortunately, the baby isn't consistently eating and isn't consistently gaining weight, probably because of that. So the zoo is currently focused on just stabilizing her. But, here's hoping it all goes super well. And whether or not it does, it's amazing the efforts that the team there are going to take care of this little baby. The goal is to eventually foster this orangutan with another female at the zoo who has proven to be a successful mother. And they are actively working to try to get a couple of the potential foster moms to learn how to foster. So we'll see how it all goes. But definitely a story worth following. And yet again, just a great reminder of how much these facilities will do for one single animal. And then last but not least in births this week, our good friends at Tanganyika Wildlife Park have announced the birth of a baby pygmy hippo that was born to Posey and Pluto. Weighing in at 13 pounds at birth, this is a really tiny little hippo, but the good news is that Posey is being a great mom. And in case you were wondering, this makes me want to go back immediately because, well, of course it does. And then we get to our deaths for the week, and we've got a couple of tough ones this week. All three are pretty rough, actually. So the first one is just that a beloved panda has died. Tenzing, the 12-year-old red panda that called the San Francisco Zoo home for most of his life, has passed away. Tenzing was an absolute legend who was beloved by his keepers and guests alike, and was known for being incredibly playful, especially with enrichment items. Tenzing loved his enrichment items. And he actually went viral because he would do all kinds of crazy acrobatic stuff and play with his toys and just all the things. Like, the world knows Tenzing. And when I was at the zoo, I actually got a chance to get to know some of his team, including his primary keeper. And they all had such a deep love for him. It was so obvious how much they adored this little man. And sadly, it was recently discovered that he was suffering from a neurological disorder known as sarcocystitis, which is actually common in red pandas, and it really messed with Tenzing's balance and just his quality of life. And at 12 years old, Tenzing has left us, but leaves a legacy of just being an incredible ambassador for his species. And this next story has some controversy to it, but I want to make sure that I make it clear right from the start here that once I read everything, I do agree with the decision. The Werribee Open Range Zoo in Australia has announced the euthanasia of both of their African wild dogs, Madash and Neo. Neo was the leader of the pack, and it was currently a 2-dog pack because earlier on, another dog attempted to wrest leadership from Neo, and that is a very violent thing, and the other dog needed to be put down because of what happened during that time. So even though there were only 2 dogs left, Neo was still the leader of the pack, and Madash did what wild dogs do and challenged for leadership in a violent way. In the process, Neo was injured to the point that he wouldn't be able to survive, so the decision was made to humanely euthanize him. Unfortunately, that decision would have left Madash as a solo dog without a pack, which is something that these animals can't handle. And given the complex nature of African wild dog pack dynamics, there was simply no other zoo that had a pack that would have accepted him. And so the decision was actually made to euthanize Madash as well, even though none of the injuries would have led to that decision. It was purely for the sake of keeping that animal mentally healthy and enriched and living a proper life. There was a lot of consultation with other facilities and a lot of thought went into this. But unfortunately, they're right. You couldn't just drop Madash into another pack. That's not how these animals work. And that's where there was a lot of controversy and some people really, shot back at the zoo as they are wont to do. But I think it was the right decision. You can't have a solo wild dog. They are really not meant for that. And so it's really sad that their last 2 wild dogs are gone now. But I admire the fact that this was all handled with the correct interpretation of what these animals need. Their welfare came first, even if the welfare decision was euthanasia, which is a challenging thought, and I understand that. And then last but not least, in deaths this week, an 8-year-old female tiger named Valentina was killed by a male tiger during introductions at Marwell Zoo. The male tiger, Pasha, had been at the zoo since February for breeding purposes, and the zoo did everything right. They were doing slow introductions, they were smelling each other next to each other, but not able to contact each other, using small howdy doors, all that stuff. And all of the signs were encouraging, so they planned out the first introduction, and they came up with safety protocols to quickly draw each tiger away from the other should either decide to attack. And unfortunately, Pasha did decide to attack. And by the time the team was able to quickly draw him away, the damage had already been done. And Valentina was no more. And it's really sad. And I think probably of all the things that I hear about on the sad/bad side of zoo things and aquarium things, that has to be the worst feeling. You're pairing these animals together. They're animals that you love and you know, and you've seen encouraging signs, and you have, little dreams of baby tigers in your head. And instead you lose an animal that not only that you loved, but that was absolutely beloved in the community. And I really hope that the team, is able to move on from this mentally and accept that tigers do this. When tigers meet in the wild with the potential for mating, it often ends very poorly for one of them, if not both of them. And so, yeah, I hope the team's able to not only accept that, but that the public also leaves them the heck alone, because, the public isn't always great at that. But yeah, so moving on from our births and deaths, we get to the rest of our zoo news section. Just a couple stories this week, and the first two are from Cincinnati. The Cincinnati Zoo made an announcement last week that brought so much joy to my heart and the hearts of many. I know we mentioned it before, but elephants Sanjay and Kabir, two of the young males in the elephant herd at the zoo, contracted EEHV, but had been vaccinated. And it turns out that both pulled through with flying colors. This is one of the, if not the first example of young, I think like around 4-year-old elephants getting EEHV after getting the vaccine. And they pulled through. This is really good news. It is very likely that both would have passed on from the disease if not for the vaccine. Not like 100% sure, but given their age and everything, it's very likely. So this is really promising. It looks, I don't want to use the word proof, but it looks kind of proof-ish that the vaccine is really helping even when animals do get the disease, which is fantastic news. And our second story from Cincy this week, do you remember our interview with Dr. Erin Curry of Crew and how she's been working on a pregnancy test for polar bears? That's so cool. She's so cool. Well, we aren't there yet, and that's your update. That's the story. We don't have a pregnancy test for polar bears. All right, moving on, our third story. No, I'm kidding. But seriously, the team has learned that a common diabetes marker can help reveal if a female polar bear recently denned, which is a sign of potential reproductive success. So we don't have the pregnancy test yet, but what we have is a way to now understand whether a female polar bear may or may not have denned, meaning we have a way to know whether or not she had a baby or had been pregnant. And that is a huge step in the right direction and can also really help, not just with the pregnancy test research that Dr. Curry is doing, but also just help to understand the behavior of the female bears and all that stuff. So huge scientific breakthrough, and mad props to Dr. Curry. Awesome, awesome human, awesome scientist. And one of these days, we gonna get little polar bear pregnancy tests, and I cannot wait to see them. And speaking of cool medical stuff, Shed Aquarium recently did a first-of-a-kind surgery to remove cysts from the head and neck of a beluga whale. And that was also the first time that a beluga has ever successfully been put under general anesthesia, which is kind of shocking to me. We have a lot of belugas in human care, and apparently we couldn't do the whole anesthesia thing before now, but now that we know how to, that means there are a lot more cool veterinary options available to these animals. So that's huge. Amazingly, part of the process was that when they woke her up from the anesthesia, her keeper team was there, her trainers and stuff, talking quietly and positively around her. But they also played sounds from her pod, like recorded sounds, to make her feel like she was with her family as well as with her keepers. Amazing stuff. And it seems to have helped. So yeah, couldn't love it more. And then last but not least, I have to address the issue of what happened at the Darling Downs Zoo in Australia this week. Unfortunately, Joanne Cobbin, the sister-in-law of the owner of the zoo, was watching keepers work in the carnivore section when she was attacked by a lioness, and the damage was so bad she lost her arm. The zoo closed for multiple days, and they did self-report the incident, which led to investigators arriving to try to figure out exactly what happened, which the zoo is also trying to figure out. Unfortunately, as I'm recording this, details are not all filled in yet, in part because Joanne is awake and alert, but is struggling to cope with what has happened and still has not gotten out of bed. So yeah, they haven't been able to talk to her and really go through the details because, you know, that might be mildly traumatic for her. So like, fair. What we do know is that Joanne was in a staff-only area, but not in the lion habitat directly. She was in like the keeper space for the lions. It's also known that she has visited the zoo every year and that in that time, she's been trained on safety protocols for when she is in those areas. When the attack occurred, one of the carnivore keepers with first aid experience used a belt as a tourniquet to stem the bleeding, and the paramedic said that saved Joanne's life. So she lost an arm, but she's still alive, which is pretty fantastic. The zoo also announced that the animal involved would not be put down or punished in any way. And yeah, kind of love that. So, you know, so sad that this happened, and sending all the love to the team and the ownership of Darling Downs Zoo and everything, and especially to Joanne, who is a school teacher who ended up getting mauled by a lion. But yeah, these things happen, and I say that not brusquely, not to like, you know, whatever it, but just these things happen. We have animals, and they are, you know, it's a dangerous job. And if you're going to be around them, you know the risks that you're taking. It's something that a lot of the facilities that I go to take very seriously with me and talk to me about a lot. And, you know, some of the private experiences that I've gotten to have that don't even make it onto the podcast, not playing with lions or anything crazy like that, obviously. But, you know, I'm very aware that there is a risk involved and have been taught a lot of things about how to handle situations. But, you know, it takes one thing and something like this can happen. And this is a good reminder of that. The people that do this work, most of them will be fine from this kind of thing, you know, ever happening. But yeah, it's a real risk and it's worth considering. And that brings us to
Stereotypical Animal Podcast theme song. Here to bring you to conservation news.
All right, only 2 stories in conservation news this week, but they're both pretty cool in my humble opinion. First of all, a new species of frog has been discovered. It is part of a genus of frogs famous for having, quote, short limbs, flat, angry-looking faces, and rounded golf ball-like bodies. The scientific name of this new species is something I'm not going to attempt to say, and it doesn't have a common name yet. But it looks incredibly grumpy, and that's possibly because its introduction to the world is that it's being called that description I just said with the whole flat, angry-looking face thing. So I would be pretty grumpy looking too, but always love seeing a new discovery. And then, you know, I love trends. And another one that keeps happening right now that I am here for is the whole Marine Refuge Area growth thing that we've talked about a lot. Different countries protecting more and more of the ocean. Well, this week it's Mexico, where they have announced an audacious plan to save more of the ocean than it previously has. They're actually planning on tripling the current amount of ocean they protect, expanding the area to around 2.2 million hectares. Now, all of these announcements from countries come with some worries that they won't actually enforce the laws and that it'll end up being for show or whatever. But so far, there's no reason to think that's the case. And it seems like more and more of the ocean is going to be saved by more and more countries every year. And I think I speak for me and all of the listeners and Jorge the sea turtle and others when I say that's a good thing.
It's time for other news. It's time for other news. Hey, now, right now, now it's time. It's time for other news. Hey, it's a segue to the part called other news.
This first story is weird and is one of those that I kind of want to hear your opinions about if you have them. The Federal Council of Switzerland has passed a new legislation requiring all animal food products like meat and stuff to be labeled with any inhumane conditions that the animals went through in life. So, like, for instance, if an animal was debeaked without anesthesia, which when you think about it is pretty terrible, right? That now needs to be on the label. So any inhumane treatment will be labeled on the food that you buy. And on the surface, yeah, I think that's a kind of cool idea. That way you can figure out, you know, if the animals that you're going to eat were ethically raised and ethically killed. I got hung up on that one. And y'all know I am not a vegetarian by any stretch of the imagination. But ethically killed was a hard thing to get through. I can picture Dr. Laura Shank, who is a vegetarian and a regular contributor and a patron, and most importantly, a friend, listening to this and laughing and being like, see, John, see. I do have to say, Laura is totally not one of those people who, you know, makes it their whole identity or is rude about it. I can see the smile on her face as she's listening to this, and I'm amused. But yeah, it's an interesting idea. So there's that side of it, right? Inform people. And like, you know, a lot of us do try to do, like, I like doing cage-free eggs. It's a thing that I do. I spend more money so that I know that the eggs are coming from chickens that have better lives. Slightly different than, again, ethically killing. But on the other hand, most of the time, food that is made more ethically costs more. It's more expensive. So there is a weird side of this in my own mind where I'm like, well, crap, all this is going to mean is that rich people and people who can afford to will make a choice, and people who can't afford the more expensive stuff are just going to have big signs on their food saying, hey, this is the crap that this creature had to endure for you to eat it. You suck. And that doesn't, I don't know. I don't love it. But at the same time, I get where they're coming from. Yeah, I want to hear what y'all think about this. Let me know. Y'all know how to reach me. Moving on from that story. A new study has shown that ants exhibit surprising levels of self-awareness. For decades, scientists have studied self-awareness animals by testing their ability to recognize themselves in a mirror. The setup is that the mirror has a blue dot on it, and when the animal looks at the mirror, they see like the blue dot on their head. And if the animal tries to remove the blue dot on its own head, then it is believed to be self-aware enough to recognize itself in the mirror. And ants have now been added to the group of animals that have passed this test, which also includes animals like manta rays, chimpanzees, parrots, and more. But pretty shocking about ants. And again, you could get into an interesting conversation about whether your size 12s coming down are ethically killing a self-aware being. It's an interesting thought. Hope none of y'all are eating ants, though. Anyway, I can't even say that. I've eaten ants. I've done the whole like eating bugs thing, like the crickets and ants, and you know, they like make them into food. So yeah, I can't really say that, but also I'm not snacking on ants on the daily. So anyway, and then the third story here is really cool to me. Many years ago, a sea lion named Ronan surprised the internet by showing the seeming ability to keep a beat, bobbing her head along with recorded music and keeping literally perfect time. Now, scientists recently decided to see if Ronan was actually able to keep the beat or whether it was just a fluke in that video. And so Ronan was matched with a percussionist who played different beats at different tempos, and Ronan matched each one perfectly, including beats she had never heard before. Perfectly. I got to tell y'all, as a person who is a drummer and a music director who plays with a lot of musicians, I would love to meet more people or sea lions that can match a beat perfectly. Just saying. No, but seriously, now I feel like I need to drum with a sea lion, and I know a couple of facilities that would probably be down with that. So maybe Emily will get more drumming time, but also maybe I can go and drum with some sea lions. It seems like a good time to me. And that brings us to
Animal holidays. Animal holidays. Hey!
All right, so July is Plastic Free July, National Bison Month, Parks and Recreation Month, and Wild About Wildlife Month. For the individual days, this is the kind of crap that drives me crazy. So this episode's coming out on the 11th, and the 11th, 12th, and 13th. Nothing. Then on the 14th, we have World Orca Day, World Chimpanzee Day, and Shark Awareness Day. The 15th is I Love Horses Day and Arctic Sea Ice Day. And the 16th is Guinea Pig Appreciation Day and World Snake Day, which is a little off to me since, well, I guess the snakes that eat guinea pigs do appreciate them, so maybe it makes sense. And those are your animal holidays for the week. All right, so there you have it, folks. Another episode of Zoo News, and I didn't even fall asleep while recording it, so that's exciting. I'd like to take a moment here. Okay, maybe I should have fallen asleep because I don't know what that was, but I'll just leave it in for y'all to get a laugh. Anyway, I'd like to take a moment here to say thank you to all of my patrons, especially my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Schenk, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, Melissa Reed, Carrie Kirkpatrick, John Lewis, who is also here for stickers, and Kevin Williams. And I'd also like to thank everyone who supplied me with stories this week, including Anya Keene, Colleen Linehan, Kim Cooley-Croninger, Carrie Kirkpatrick, Kevin Williams, Emily Rockbuck, Anna McEachran, Elizabeth Charles, Maddie Pat's Mite, Jacob Zinn, Marianne Rossi, Ken Tryon, Dr. Laura Schenk, Melissa Reed, Matt Fouts, Ali Malensky, Kay Malensky, Rowena White, Jay Dunkley, Dr. Natalie Taco, Amanda Berg, Dr. Zoe Rossi, Jay Meredith, Sarah Henry, Ann Yoshioka, Barbara Bennett, Sarah Gilsul, Alexa Lopez, Miles Rossi, and Michael Sebastian. Thank you all so much for contributing to this week's episode. We'll be back on Tuesday with a brand new interview episode. But before we get to that, don't forget, friends, the words, newsy credits, backwards are Snyder Kiswen.
The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.
And they have announced an audacious plan. Audacious? Audacious.